Monday. So what I want to do is just use the example sample project from 2016 Revit. It's called the RIC Advanced Sample Project. If you can't find it here on your opening screen, you can just go to Open and in your program data, or program files, excuse me, program files, in the Autodesk folder, you should be able to find Revit 2016 and samples, and here's where you'll find that RIC Advanced Sample Project. So again here, program files, Autodesk, Revit 2016 samples is where you're going. You can get that guy opened up. And this just gives us a relatively developed model that we can use to start looking at drawings and diagrams that you may want to include in your drawing set. So the first thing that I want to talk about just a little bit is setting up a sheet in order to be able to print things. So under View, you can come in here and hit the New Sheet button, and you can see, and this will be a bit frustrating, but a lot of everything in this advanced file is set up in metric. So before we do this, let's pop back out and go to Manage and Project Information, and in here we can sorry, that was under Project Units. You'll find, so Project Units under the Manage tab is where you can find the units to be able to adjust them into feet and fractional inches. If you want, you can go all the way through and adjust these. Really, the length is the thing that we're primarily concerned with adjusting to get things working here. So again, under View and Sheet, the two default sheets here are A0 and A1. And when we open these, what you'll see is that it comes with this sort of terrible default Autodesk title block. So you'll want to go in and hit Edit Family and go in and select all this and delete it. It may be that you want to actually create your own here by using some of those text blocks and so forth, but certainly don't leave the default in there. You can see here by default the units here in this family are also in metric. So I can again go to Manage and Project Units and adjust them. So we're in a separate file here. We've opened a sheet family, and so that's why the units are once again in metric. So I can hit OK. When I select one of these edges, you can see now also because we were in metric, the dimensions are quite funny. So you could switch this back to, say, a 36-inch edge just by selecting the edges. You'll see the dimension lines come up, and I can change this into a 2-foot by 3-foot drawing just by selecting the edges and changing those dimensions. And really what I'm concerned with is this sheet, which is basically a piece of paper that I wanna be able to use. I'm gonna hit Save As, a family, and I want to save this as, say, 24 by 36 sheet. And I'll load that back into the project. You can see in this view, I can't automatically put it in. That's not a problem. That error will come up. So down here, under Sheets now, if we go back to View and Sheet, we should be able to find our 24 by 36. And you can see how it's created a new view, A5, with this blank piece of paper. And once I've got this, now I can basically start using it to lay out my drawings however I want. You can see some of the 3D views that come in from this default project are already built in, and we'll use these just to talk about some of the characteristics of these 3D views. If I kind of bounce around a little bit here, or say let's just go to a default 3D view, So if I want to make a new view here, what I can do is right click on the word 3D there and say duplicate. And you can see it's created a new view here. And then I can go to rename, again by right clicking on it, and call it new 3D view. So by default, this view is just of the entire model. And one thing that I want to talk about first is just the way in which we can crop this view and can kind of control it. So one part to point out here, and again, I've got the view selected over here, is, I don't know why the 3D section box wasn't working yet. Anyway, we'll hit crop view, and then hit crop region view, and when I hit apply, you'll see that it brings up a bounding box here that I can actually use to frame my view and go ahead and crop the view of the building this way. If I want to get this framed in a little bit tighter and crop some of the landscaping out of it, I can still move the view around here, but it's all fixed inside of this framed window now as I do it. If I want to lock the view, there's a little button down here called, it's basically a house shape with a lock on it. And I can save orientation and lock the view. And in this case, it's going to basically keep it from being able to rotate and spin around. You can see I get the negative sign when I do it. Something that can be handy when you're trying to diagram your project is if I select an object here, you can see that there's a little button that comes up here that's kind of difficult to find. It's called Displace Elements. And in essence, when I'm in a 3D view like this, what it allows me to do is sort of explode the project. So I could take, say, each of these kind of panels that they've used in this project. If I wanted to diagram them and sort of pull them out, I could go through and displace each of them simply by grabbing them. And you'll notice that if I go to another 3D view or to a default 3D view, those elements are still where they should have been. So the displace elements is very particular to the actual view that you're in. You can also see I can reset things back to where they were, or I can also hit this path button, which if I zoom in, you'll see is basically creating little dashed lines indicating the relationship between the position of the object, the original position of the object, and where it is now. So you can use these to quickly create a kind of axonometric view of the project. So in this case, I probably don't want all this topography and so forth in the view. So as usual, you can hit the VG, literally the buttons V and then G, and I can come in and uncheck topography, and it'll pull things out. You can see I've still got the landscape elements and the parking area in here too. So go back to VG, see if we can't find some of these other elements. Uncheck planting, parking, say okay. Now we've got just the diagram of the 3D view that we were hoping to have. We did a little bit of this already, but I want to talk a little bit more about using the sun path and shadows. So if I hit the shadows on button and then right click on it's way down here in the corner. And the sun settings, I can come in. Sorry, we'll wait and do the sun settings in a second. See if sorry, dog needed to come in there. So I've turned the shadows on down here, and I'm going to come over here to the graphic display settings. And in here is where you can start to articulate things. And there's a few things that I can't recommend enough doing before using, especially when you're using shadows and lighting. One in particular is to show ambient shadows, which are just going to soften some of the lines. The sketchy lines are very be careful with them. It gets very SketchUp-y in a big hurry. But down here is where you can actually control the ambient light and the intensity of the sun within the image that you're looking at. You can see how just by softening some of the light and softening some of the shadows, you can make this look much more realistic and much cleaner. Additionally, down here you can define a background image. It's tied to either a sky, a gradient, or an image. I recommend maybe just using the gradient. You can see what it looks like here, just to kind of ground the object a little bit. The sky tends to be a little bit distracting. You can see here what it looks like when I pivot in till I get the horizon line. I've got my view lock still, so unlock the view. My crop view is keeping me limited from seeing the sky, but it's not necessarily all that beneficial to use. So as far as the sun path goes, I know we used it a little bit. I just wanted to go back to it a little, just so you can get a better sense of how this works entirely, or through some of the settings. So here I'm just going to define a single day, and under location, if I hit the dot dot dot, you can see if I give it a second here and give it a location, it actually loads a kind of Google Maps. I think it's actually using Open Maps. If I put in Charlotte, NC, it brings up a map where I can actually, drag the location to be very, very specific to where I might be. Oh, it's using Bing. There we go. The weather here isn't necessarily all that useful, and you can also save a site location within these settings. Anyway, what I'm concerned with is getting the location set, and potentially getting the day and time set within the sun system. Because the site was already set as Manchester, New Hampshire for this project, it gives me an error as I try to adjust the sun's locations. So once I've got this drawing set up, or this diagram set up, and I'll come back out to the crop view, I can drag the blue dots to kind of frame a little bit tighter around the diagram. Once I've got this set, and I've got it over here as the 3D view, and I'll go ahead and lock the view again. Now I can go back down to my sheet that I brought in, and it was called A5. Some of those other ones you can take a look at. Basically, when you open that up, now what you can do is go to a given view in your project browser here, and you just drag it in, and you'll see the frame for the view here, and then you can click once more to actually drop it in. So by default, the project here is coming in at a kind of custom scale. If I want to, I can adjust that to match to a specific scale. So it looks like I need to go pretty small here. Maybe 1 inch equals 30 feet. A little too small. And obviously this is in an Axon drawing, but you can get a sense here. It by default, it gives you a little view tag. It actually gives you the name of the view depending upon what you had here. It tries to be as smart as possible. You can select the view tag here to edit it, just like any other family. And in essence, the views here. Let's see if I get 16th to work. Let's get closer. In essence, you can kind of fill up the sheet with a series of drawings. So if I wanted to take another, let's say another wall section of the project and drag it in, it's telling me I've already got it placed on A2. It wants me to duplicate it. So I'll go ahead and duplicate the view. Oops. Just so you can get a sense of how this works. Now that I've got a copy of it, I can come back down to A5. So it's trying to be smarter than me, make sure to prevent me from placing too many versions of the drawing in the same file. So the wall section I can drop in here again. It gives me the same wall section and the scale. So I can select the scale here under view scale. So if I want to say go to like 3/4 of an inch equals a foot, that's pretty big. I can additionally come in, you can adjust the scale there, or you can do it here under the actual drawing. You can see how these things match each other. So if I go to Um, let's see if 3/4 is too big. Let's just try 1/4 inch equals a foot. You can see how the only thing that's really changing is the details, the annotations, the text. And if I come back in, now you can see how the drawing is 1/4 the size that it was before. Looks like I could probably get away with 1/2 inch equals a foot. Let's see. Pretty close. Not quite. So the the drawings are relatively straightforward for putting together. You really kind of assemble them out of a set of things, that a set of views that you've set up in the drawing. While I've got the wall section open here, I will talk a little bit about some of the line weights in here, just to point out how they work and what's going on with them. So I'm zooming in on the wall section here a little bit, and under Manage, you can see there's both object styles, which are similar to what you get in AutoCAD, and over here under Additional Settings, I can drop down. There's actually a line weights option, and here under this line weights option, it tells me what each of the designations, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 16, the 16 different line weights are, depending upon what scale we're at. And so 110 through 1 to 500. These basically are your sort of default settings. You don't really want to screw with these. They basically work relatively well. So this isn't the location actually to go to adjust your line weights. This would be too much of a pain. So where you actually do want to go is here under Object Styles. And when I open up Object Styles, I get this list that looks a lot like visibility graphics, except those line weights, 1, 2, 3 through 16, are all linked here to the specific object that I might be working on. So as a for instance here under Floors, sorry, the dog. So as I was saying here, you can go to specific objects and adjust their line weight. So as a for instance here, you can see in this wall section, the floor as it's getting cut is pretty heavy compared to the wall. It's actually defined right here under the cut through the floor. So if I hit the drop down and say change this to line weight 2 for the floors when they're being cut and hit OK, you can see how that lightens up that line weight. I can't encourage you enough to, especially with wall sections, but also with floor plans and so forth, to do quick test prints of just a corner on an 8.5 by 11, just to see how the line weights are reading. Even though you're using a kind of automated system such that Revit is, the line weights are always problematic. They always look really Revit-y, and you need to use your own sensibility to actually go in and adjust these settings. Once you've got them set to something that you like, that looks good to you, then you just, the files will always come off looking much cleaner. So the key thing here is just to go in and take the time, do the test prints, and figure out how things look, so that then later on in the semester the file is already set up, and you can just drag and drop these drawings into a drawing set and plot them off. So speaking of plotting, back here under A5, just to get this drawing out once I've got it set up here on my drawing sheet. I'm just going to shift this one up a little bit. It's as simple as coming up here to the Revit drop down and hitting print. You're almost always going to want to just create a PDF first. So under the print range, you can come down here and hit selected views or sheets, and you can go in and select the actual sheets that you want to plot or drawings that you want to plot. So if I hit sheet A5, yes, I want to save these. I'll do that as set 1, and then here under settings I can go to setup and maybe change this to Arc D, which is a 24 by 36 sheet, leaving it on landscape. If you wanted to change this so that it was a portrait setting, maybe so that that wall section fit better onto the sheet, you would actually go in and adjust the piece of paper to be 24 by 36 so that you're laying the sheet out as cleanly as possible. you can so basically in here is where you can define your paper size and orientation, but that's not going to just rotate this sheet. If I were to change this to landscape, it would keep this orientation and scale the view or scale the drawing, squeeze it basically into a 24-inch wide setting. When I hit OK, it's going to save out my PDF. You can see it goes through here, and then once it's done, it should open it up. Bummer. So here we go. Now I've opened this up, and you can see how actually the rendered view of this file, especially when I soften up the shadows a little bit, it actually is a relatively nice diagram of the project. And I think by softening the shadows and softening the intensity of the sun, you get a much better, a much softer kind of view that's not so Revity as a lot of these tend to be. So the last thing I want to talk about is rendering. I'm just going to pull something up here. Okay, so with these tower projects, as you're thinking about them, for those of you that are in the integrated project studio, I think it's really useful to be conscientious of the way that the project looks in the skyline. If you're going to talk about context, I guess this is the context that you're working with. Even though there isn't much of an identity to downtown Charlotte, a lot of the projects tend to be all over the place. I do think it's still important to sort of address the way that your project would fit in the site. So what I've done here is just pulled up some Charlotte skyline views. If you're not familiar with it, you can hit the search tools button here and change the image size that it's looking for to large, so that you're getting a relatively high resolution image. If I hit view image here, I can save this view over to my desktop, and you can see here I'm basically looking back at our site from right across the top of the arena here, and so I'm really looking, I guess you would say, almost well, from the east. This would be southeast. This is pretty much straight from the east. It's important to kind of think about the perspective, and then I would say I'm probably close to 400 feet in the air. It looks like I'm about even, maybe a little bit higher than Grant Thornton. So I'm just trying to estimate roughly where the camera is in this view, so that I can place the camera in Revit in a way that'll work relatively well. So what I've done is open up the example tower project that we've been using, and I just copied a simple curtain wall across the entire face of it. And if I take a look here in level 1, and then come down to a 3D view that I've created here called Section Cut, if I right click on it, I can tell it to show camera. And what I can do is kind of think about my orientation in terms of the camera view from that photograph that I was looking at. And really it's going to be kind of from across the arena this direction. I've got this rotated to this tower is rotated to the Charlotte grid, not to northeast, southwest. So works with the Cartesian coordinates. I'm going to kind of position the camera over here and then take a look at the 3D view. You can see here in this view, I've actually got the section box turned on, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. These section boxes allow you to, so if I select the section box, I can pull on these faces and it's actually cropping the tower geometry. Again, a good way to make some simple diagrams that start to explain the project a little bit better. Once you put this big curtain wall on, it tends to really slow down the file. So if I get that bright, that blue arrow highlighted, then I can pull on the section box. Looks like I've got an extra floor floating in here. Oh, I bet I pulled that out of the tower. Yeah. Oh well. Okay, so getting the section box turned on for, so getting the section box turned on, sorry. You can right click, and in the same spot where we were looking to show camera, you can also hit show section box. Um, and there's also a checkbox here under the properties dialog for any given 3D view, is really where you're going to be using this. So at this point, what I want to do with the 3D view is to actually set that camera in level 1 and try to get it to. So again, I'll select the view, right click, and say Show Camera. Looks like it went away. Why that's not coming up? So I've gone into the site view for the project here, and again, I'm not sure why the show camera button wasn't coming up there, but I can get this view framed roughly in the correct direction. You know, you can also just do this in the 3D view to ensure that you're getting roughly the kind of view that you want to get to match the angle in the photograph. I'm just going to take a look again here so we can get a sense of how parallel we are to the Grant Thornton, the Darth Vader building. I'm going to kind of adjust there. Looks like we need to go a little bit this way. So you can be kind of, actually looks like, trying to get the top of the building to be roughly parallel between the two. You can always adjust this stuff in Photoshop afterwards, but at the same time, it's really helpful to kind of get the view roughly approximate to the photo before you get into it. So just roughly, you know, using some of the materials that you've already defined, if you go back into view, here are the buttons for rendering out a three-dimensional view. There are distinct differences between rendering using your own computer and rendering in the cloud, and I'll talk about those quickly. So here under traditional rendering, you can see it uses the NVIDIA graphics card Mental Ray or the Autodesk Ray Tracer. The Mental Ray is relatively good. You're almost always going to want to do a draft version, and you can see how small these base ones are, just to make sure that you can kind of quickly get a little test rendering out, understanding how it works. And then here under lighting, you can define it to be exterior sun only. So different definitions in terms of what you're doing. You're going to get different kinds of renderings out. If I take a look here, it's kind of hazy in this photo, so I'm going to actually make it more cloudy and see if I can't get the light to kind of match roughly the light that's in the photograph that I've got. And then I hit the render button, and this should go relatively quickly, but I'll pause. And here you can see the kind of draft image. Obviously, it's very pixelated, but what I'm concerned with is getting the lighting roughly right. And I think I'm in the ballpark. So now I'll switch it up to high, and I'll render again. And I'll pause it so you don't have to sit through it. Okay, so once this is done, and obviously this isn't the most amazing building, but at least gives us something to work with. You can go to export here. And there are basically three options, well, four, but bitmap is useless. So JPEG, a PNG, and a TIFF. I just want you to go through and export all three. PNG and a TIFF. And you can close out of this. So what I want to do is just open it up in Photoshop and kind of take a look at the differences in the different exports that we get from those renderings. And first thing I'll do is just open up that skyline view, and then I'll open up the three images we saved. So what you see here is that the JPEG has basically a gray background, or whatever you set the sky background to be, whether it's a gradient or a sky. But the PNG and the TIFF both come in with transparent backgrounds, so it allows you to kind of use the transparency. Even you can see here through my parapet, I can see through that and into the background. It's going to help a lot when going to position this content into the skyline photo. So I'm just going to hit all and copy. So I hit Control A and Control C, and then bring it in here. And you can see it's actually a little bit wonky. I'm assuming you all know roughly how to adjust these things. First by going to Edit and Transform, and I'm going to skew the image a little bit, and I won't spend a lot of time doing this, but get it so that it's roughly leaning the same way as the Grant Thornton, and then we'll scale it. And then what it looks like, we need to do is probably you'd go in and edit the image a bit to kind of crop, behind the parking deck next door, and edit some of the trees out of the site there. Oh no, wait, we'd actually be over here. Sorry. Okay, I had that off a little bit. That's the park. That's the parking area there. So it's actually much easier. I just noticed the light rail there. It does look like we probably still want to crop a little bit behind the transit center. And I'm trying to look for parallel kind of lines here with the Wachovia building behind it. I won't bore you guys with a bunch of that. It does look like you kind of crop based on the transit center there a little bit to allow the building to come through, and definitely need to do some more transformations with the skew to get the base more aligned with the perspective. It's a little bit better. Anyway, I'll leave that to you guys to kind of finish, and then certainly you can use some of the other adjustments in terms of brightness and contrast to get the image to actually layer into the project a little bit better, and make it feel more realistic. The only other thing that I might encourage you to do is to consider doing a nighttime view, where you might invert the image and again play with the contrast and light in order to tweak how well it blends. So what I'd like for you to do for this tutorial is actually to use your own project and to do a rendering into a site. So whether it's your studio project for this semester or something else. And for those of you that aren't in the integrated project, you can take whatever kind of rough tower geometry that you might have done or been using, and do a rendering and place it into the site. So upload an image this time, not a Revit file, an image, a photoshopped image of your project into a photograph of the site. Okay, thanks.